First Baptist Atlanta, thank you for reaching out and suggesting this video report from our family and ministry in Brazil. We are grateful for the support, both in prayer and financially, from FBA. We consider FBA, when I say we, I mean myself and my wife, Mary Jo. FBA is our home church. We've been adopted by Crossroads, a Sunday morning Bible study, a group of people we've come to love and appreciate and enjoy being around at every opportunity. We are just grateful to the Lord for how supportive FBA is to our ministry. We serve with a small mission agency called Be One Together, and they loan us to Evangelism Explosion, or EE, Brazil. EE Brazil is a training, equipping ministry for personal evangelism. We work through the local church, and we hold workshops and training clinics in local churches. We have training for adults, we have training for young people, as well as training for children. The situation in Brazil is pretty similar to the situation in the United States, beginning with the use of masks and the gel and the social distancing, sheltering in place. All of those things have been happening in Brazil. Major cities are greatly affected. Rural cities are much less affected. Nevertheless, the economy, this country was put in lockdown, as in the United States, and is slowly coming out of that, perhaps at a slower pace than the United States, for probably a number of reasons, some of which are political, but others are just practical. Brazil's in the southern hemisphere. The number of cases, by the way, the number of cases of Brazil is number 2 under the United States in terms of the number of confirmed cases. Unlike the United States, Brazil is going into the winter months, being in the southern hemisphere, whereas the United States is going into the summer months, which will be helpful. So the number of cases is not likely to decline so quickly in Brazil, because respiratory ailments are common in the cooler weather. So that's a matter of prayer, in fact, that somehow that trend can reverse in spite of the fact that they're going into the cooler months. Brazil's healthy. We are adapting to our situation and our limitations. Before the virus, we'd actually held 9 workshops and clinics, training 277 people in January and February, which is an excellent number considering those are summer vacation months in Brazil. But about mid-March, things came to a halt because of the virus, and things have been suspended. And therefore, those training events are not happening at the moment. So my challenge to our missionaries there has been to remain in contact with churches, promoting communication between them and the churches, but also between the church leaders and the trainers and trainees and prayer partners, all up and down the line, the kinds of communications which should be going on in a normal semester of training to continue going on using apps on a phone, such as WhatsApp, or using Google Meet or Zoom or other platforms that might be available to them. We have indications that that's going on. I received a video of a local church facilitator who challenged her students to record an explanation of each point of the gospel after she gave the introduction to the gospel, and then the 5 points which would follow. So one person presenting the first point, another person presenting the second point, and so on. So I received the video of Jose sharing grace. He is a person who lives in Rio, lives in very simple circumstances there, but with a smile on his face began to share about grace, explaining it using the verses that we teach them to use, the illustrations that they become adept at sharing, which will help people's understanding of that part of the gospel. He did that with a smile on his face, and it was clear that he could share the gospel with anyone he came in contact with. So everything's gone virtual. Churches are meeting virtually, some on Sundays, midweek, um, and business ministry is being conducted over the different platforms that are available. One day last week, I had already been on 4 calls, one with our team, another with an individual team member, actually 2 with a team member, one for some training that I was taking about how to conduct a virtual board of directors meeting, because our bylaws say that we have to have an annual meeting, and it appears that we might have to have that meeting via Zoom or Google Meet. So I was getting some tips on how to conduct that meeting. And then that evening, I chose to dial into a call planned by one of our missionaries and a children's leader that he works with in Rio. And they had arranged and invited people to come on and so that they could listen to some other children's leaders talk about the challenges as well as the opportunities that are presented themselves during the pandemic. With the purpose of that would be to decide and kind of confirm in their minds that something that they were thinking about doing was in fact going to be something that would be helpful to these children's leaders. And as I listened, after I just greeted the people very briefly and then listened in on the call, it was interesting to hear the leader that our missionary Clayton is working with, Patricia. She made the observation after they listened to some of the leaders share about some of the difficulties they've had to continue their work with children, particularly their EE training of children, because we believe children can also share the gospel. And she made the observation that these children finished their school year via smartphone, because many of them don't have a laptop or a desktop in their homes. So many of them would finish their school year using a smartphone, and then they go to church either midweek or Sundays using a smartphone. They talk with their friends via smartphone, and her observation was the children are tired of their smartphones. They want to do something different. And I found that was very insightful for us as a ministry. And so Clayton and Patricia are working on some activities. They will share those activities and suggested activities virtually, digitally, but they are activities that won't involve a cell phone, with the possible exception of making some recordings of children who are doing some different games and exercises to learn or reinforce what they've already learned about the gospel presentation that we suggest that children use. So that was exciting to hear that. Those things are being prepared right now, literally as we speak. They're working on them. And it's just been a joy to see these kind of things develop as God has directed us in how to continue the ministry and to strengthen it in spite of the limitations that exist from the pandemic. Let me close by suggesting some ways you could pray for us, pray for our family. Of course, we just depend upon your prayers for our strength and wisdom that we need to conduct this ministry. We suspended 15 training events for this first half of 2020, and we would like to reschedule those, but at this point, we're not free to do that. We're asking the Lord to somehow open up Brazil and sufficiently that those can be rescheduled, and there would be others, another 15 or 20 or 25, which should be scheduled along with them for the second semester of 2020. Pray that we'll continue to have open channels to stay in contact with our churches and our leaders in contact with the church leaders. And then we also are trying to maintain contact with those that support our missionaries. I've suggested to our missionaries that they need to maintain that contact and tell their supporters about what they're doing, how God is blessing, how they've adapted to the situation they find themselves in. We have a partnership, two denominational partnerships, one with Presbyterian, one with the Baptist. The Baptist partnership is going through some adaptation to try to adapt to this situation of the pandemic. So you can pray about those opportunities, that we can still take advantage of those, and that the partnerships will be strengthened rather than weakened through the activities that we conduct in the pandemic. There's a very real situation that exists in our ministry and other ministries in that we're not selling training materials right now, nor holding events. So there's a lack of income to support our office. We have rent and fixed expenses that exist and depend upon that income. So pray as we deal with that challenge. And then quickly, as I mentioned, going into the winter months, pray that Brazil can come through this virus, and rather than have more cases, that somehow the cases will begin to decline despite of the cooler weather that will be happening in Brazil. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your support, faithful monthly support. We love you and appreciate you for it. Thank you so much. God bless.